Beginnings by Emily Carr. Victoria on Vancouver Island, British Columbia, was the little town. I was the little girl. It is hard to remember just when you first become aware of being alive. It is like looking through rain onto a bald new lawn. As you watch, the brown is all pricked with pale green. You did not see the points pierce, did not hear the stab. There they are. My father did not come straight from England to Victoria when, a lad of 19, he started out to see something of the world. He went to many countries, looking, thinking, choosing. At last, he heard of the California gold rush and went there. He decided that California was a very fine country, but after the rush was over he went back to England, married an English girl, and brought his bride out to California in a sailing ship all round Cape Horn. Intending to settle in California, he went into business, but after a while it irked father to live under any flag other than his own. In a few years, having decided to go back home to live, he chartered a vessel and took to England the first shipment of California wheat. But, staunch Englishman though my father was, the new land had said something to him, and he chafed at the limitations of the old, which, while he was away from it, had appeared perfect. His spirit grew restless, and, selling all his effects, he brought his wife and 2 small daughters out to the New World. Around the Horn they came again, and up the west coast of America, till they came to the most English-tasting bit of all Canada, Victoria, on the south end of Vancouver Island, which was then a Crown colony. Father stood still, torn by his loyalty to the old land and his delight in the new. He saw that nearly all the people of Victoria were English, and smiled at how they tried to be more English than the English themselves, just to prove to themselves and the world how loyal they were being to the old land. Father set his family down in British Columbia. He and Mother had accepted Canada long before I, the youngest but one of their 9 children, was born. By that time their homesickness was healed. Instead of being English, they had broadened out into being British, just as Fort Camosun had swelled herself from being a little Hudson's Bay fort inside a stockade with bastions at the corners, into being the little town of Victoria and the capital of British Columbia. Father bought 10 acres of land, part of what was known as Beckley Farm. It was over James Bay, and I have heard my mother tell how she cried at the lonesomeness of going to live in a forest. Yet Father's land was only 1 mile out of the town. There was but one other house near, that of Mr. James Bissett of the Hudson's Bay Company. Mr. Bissett had a wife and family. They moved east long before I was born, but I was to know, when nearly grown up, what the love of those pioneer women must have been for one another, for when, years later, I stood at Mrs. Bissett's door in Lougheed, seeing her for the first time, and said, "Mrs. Bissett, I am Emily Carr's daughter, Emily," she took me to herself in the most terrific hug. As far back as I can remember, Father's place was all made and in order. The house was large and well built of California redwood, the garden prim and carefully tended. Everything about it was extremely English. It was as though Father had buried a tremendous homesickness in this new soil, and it had rooted and sprung up English. There were hawthorn hedges, primrose banks, and cow pastures with shrubberies. We had an orchard and a great tin-lined apple room, wonderful strawberry beds and raspberry and currant bushes, all from imported English stock, and an Isabella grapevine which Father took great pride in. We had chickens and cows and a pig, a grand vegetable garden. Almost everything we ate grew on our own place. Just one of Father's fields was left Canadian. It was a piece of land which he brought later when Canada had made Father and Mother love her, and at the end of 50 years we still called that piece of ground the New Field. The new field had a snake fence around it, that is, a zigzag fence made of split cedar logs or of young sapling trees laid crisscross, their own weight holding them in place so that they required no nails. Snake fences were extravagant in land and in wood, but wood and land were cheaper in Canada in the early days than were nails and hinges. You made a gate wherever you wanted, one by lowering bars to pass through and piling them up again. The only English thing in our new field was a stile built across the snake fence. The new field was full of tall fir trees with a few oaks. The underbrush had been cleared away, and the ground was carpeted with our wild Canadian lilies, the most delicately lovely of all flowers, white with bent necks and brown eyes looking back into the earth, their long, slender petals rolled back from their drooping faces, pointing straight up at the sky like millions of quivering white fingers. The leaves of the lilies were very shiny, green, mottled with brown, and their perfume like heaven and earth mixed.